Hello, hello, comrades. Welcome back to the Liberation Hour. This is your host, Comrade Felicity, coming at you pre-recorded. Yes, folks, it is hella cold currently, and I usually record in the studio at night. Personally, I only drive a front-wheel drive car, so I really don't want to be risking my life out there on them streets tonight. So I am pre-recording from my apartment once again. Welcome back, folks. A little bit more intimate, a little bit more... well, I don't know. We're here. We're queer. And we're ready to talk about the news. And we're ready to talk about all of the things that have been happening. And as my interview that I have for this episode, it is on the transgenocide and what this means for the broader working movement and what we need to do to protect and contribute to supporting our trans comrades and standing in solidarity with them. And so that is what we will be discussing in the later interview part. As usual, 30 minutes are given to the interview on the radio edit, and then the full interview will be available at my YouTube channel at Comrade Felicity. Or Communist Bananas, if you're nasty. And so, let's go ahead and do the top of the hour disclaimer. WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign online community. Views expressed are those of the speakers and do not represent WRFU UCIMC. Folks, welcome back to the show. We have so much to talk about today. We have so much to discuss. If you heard that scratching back there, that is my cat in the litter box. Hey, Zuko. Hey, sweetie. Hi, sweetie. Hi. Yep, these guys are joining us for the show today, so if you hear some meowing in the background, those are my beautiful cats, Zuko and Queenie. Maybe they'll pop up if you're watching the YouTube version a few days later. Perhaps they will appear behind me on the couch, so who knows? Maybe they'll join my copy of Capital, so maybe. But anyway, we have some important news to be covering today, and so we're going to go ahead and get right into it. First news story of the day that I am really wanting to cover, that I think is one of the most important things that have been happening, the Minneapolis protests. Folks, this is huge. We have so much happening politically in the world right now, and it's like in the negatives, folks. It is January. We're at the very beginning of 2026. It is super freaking cold. And people are out protesting because ICE is out kidnapping neighbors and killing people, executing people. It is unacceptable. And frankly, the people on the streets in Minnesota who are protecting their neighbors and protecting their friends and their family are heroes and our comrades in the struggle against the Gestapo, which has been unleashed upon us by the bourgeois class, who is obviously running our current government, headed by Donald Trump and his cronies. Now, to break it down a little bit more, for those who've been living under a rock, currently there are huge protests happening in Minneapolis over the murder of Renee Good, which happened about, I want to say 3.5, almost 4 weeks ago. No, not 4 weeks. It had to be about 3.5 weeks ago. And the death of Alex Pretty, which happened about 4 days ago now. And yeah, these two people were killed by ICE, murdered by ICE, executed by ICE. They were killed by agents of the Gestapo. And if you have seen the video of Renee Good was murdered in her car by an ICE agent. I forget his name. However, you can find him all over the internet. He made a lot of money off of this, actually, because a lot of evil people wanted to fund him after he murdered Renee Good. And a ton of people donated to his GoFundMe. So send as much hate as you can. Dox this man. Shame him off the face of this earth, because he is a murderer. Renee Good was simply turning her car. She was present at a demonstration. However, I don't believe she was part of it, and if she was within her legal rights to do so. While she was within a traffic violation, that does not at all mean that she deserved to be shot 3 times in the face, brutally. This was a blatant, just straight up murder. And if you know anything about conservative news and conservative media, you have probably also been seeing and hearing the narratives that have been coming out from Fox News, all of these different conservative news networks and everything who have been reporting on the subject and have been saying that she is a lesbian, which of course she is. There's nothing wrong with that. But of course that carries a negative connotation to anybody who watches Fox News because they are automatically going to assume, oh, she's a lesbian, she's gay, she must be a bad mother, which is also what they said. And that she must be unfit to parent, and she essentially deserved it. That is very, very much the message that has been going around within conservative media circles. It is extremely harmful, of course, but it is because they need to keep with this baseline rhetoric, because this is what the Trump administration won on. And we can definitely see that the policies that Trump is carrying out, it's hard to tell whether these are exactly Donald Trump's orders or whether these are orders from people who work within his cabinet. There's a very good chance that a lot of these extremely violent orders are coming not necessarily from Trump, not that it makes it any better, but from Stephen Miller. If you don't know who Stephen Miller is, Stephen Miller works within Donald Trump's cabinet, and he has some of the most brutal and suppressive ideas and policies in which he wants to enact through ICE. He is responsible for some of the more violent parts of ICE, and this is most certainly, Stephen Miller is certainly the architect of a lot of what has been going on. I would say Stephen Miller is, in some ways, more dangerous than Donald Trump. And I say that not because Donald Trump isn't a dangerous figure. He most certainly is. He is a fascist icon. But Stephen Miller is the executioner of those policies. Donald Trump is more of a figurehead. While he does do terrible things and he does have terrible ideas, Donald Trump is not the one who was always carrying out those granular orders. These are often also being delegated. These are tasks that are delegated to people who have a more consistent idea of how they want to carry these things out. And Stephen Miller is that person. We can clearly see how this has also been rubbing off in his foreign policy with Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is a Cuban. However, his family is an anti-Castro Cubans. And I'm going to get more into Marco Rubio a little bit later. But we can see through Trump's policies kind of who is shining through more based off of their own rhetoric. And Stephen Miller is certainly a Hitlerian piece of crap. I can't swear on air, but if I could, you know what I'd be saying right now. And is one of those people who, this is very much Stephen Miller's bread and butter. This is what Stephen Miller wants, more than anything, is to purge the American population of brown people, essentially. This is the Fourth Reich, essentially. This is what we're dealing with. Stephen Miller, Marco Rubio, Kristi Noem, all of these people are some of the most Hitlerian, Fourth Reich looking ass, people who, have been doing some of the most heinous policies out there. And they're not necessarily the smartest people ever, but they are extremely violent and they have an agenda. And they have smart people working for them who are able to make these somewhat coherent, and this is what makes them dangerous. As you all know, as I mentioned before, Alex Pretty was murdered on Saturday at demonstrations on the streets of Minneapolis. These were demonstrations that were protesting the murder of Renee Good not but 3 weeks ago. Alex Pretty, if you've seen the video, it is impossible at this point for even conservative media to be able to explain away what was going on. It is so clearly obvious if you've seen the video from multiple angles, which I have. It's floating around on the internet. They cannot get rid of all of it. And it's already out there. Thousands of pairs of eyes have seen what has been done by the Gestapo, and they don't like it. And what was done exactly by the Gestapo? What did they do? Well, again, if you're living under a rock, here's what happened. Alex Pretty was a bystander. He was a registered nurse. He was a veteran, and he worked at the VA. He was just a regular guy. However, it is notable that, he had already kind of been on some of these different databases because he was an anti-ICE activist prior to this. And so Alex Pretty came over to support a woman who was being harassed by ICE. And, they tried to say that he was brandishing a gun. He was not. The entire time before he was tackled to the ground and shot 10 times, he was holding a phone and he was recording them. At no point was his gun taken out, except for when one of the ICE agents forcibly took it from him, and then they executed him. Alex Pretty was a regular person. He was there trying to support someone who was being harassed by the very agency that murdered him. And this has undoubtedly only made things worse, especially for the Trump administration. It was already, I think, hard to explain away what happened with Renee Good. And we also have to remember that these are white people. In the context of how America works, when it's a person of color or someone who might not be as sympathetic, we can absolutely see this with the spin of Renee Good's story. Any little piece of quote, I have air quotes going on right now, evidence that can be located to prove that this is an evil person, a terrorist, or XYZ, to change the immediate minds of Americans. That is what the propaganda machine will do. Well, the problem is that with the murder of Alex Pretty, it's kind of really hard to do that because Alex Pretty is, by all accounts, a stand-up citizen, or he was. And the video is undoubtedly a video of him being tackled to the ground by 7 different people, and then summarily executed. It's a gruesome scene, to be frank. They shot him multiple times while he was already dead on the ground. He died practically immediately, I believe. It's hard to think that there was any way that he could have survived the first initial rounds of gunfire against him. But I truly hope he did not feel any pain, because it was a horrific sight. And multiple people got videos of this, is the thing. ICE was not alone while they did this. This happened from multiple angles. This is literally like seeing multiple angles of 9/11. It was kind of crazy seeing all these different angles that were coming out as it happened, because, I saw the news about 30 minutes after it had initially happened. And then there was the angle from, I believe it was a coffee bar. It was through a glass window that we were watching this. And then, you see the other angle that was a lot closer, and then there was other angles that were a lot closer. And it's pretty easy to piece together that, this was an execution. This man did not pose a threat at all to ICE agents in any way. And even if he did, he didn't deserve to be murdered. Point blank period. There's not really much else to say about that. But what's the fallout exactly from this? Well, there's a lot. So ICE definitely didn't do themselves any favors with this, and neither did the Trump administration. I would say that currently the Trump administration is definitely trying to backpedal because you done stepped out of line, buddy. They done been stepping out of line. But the problem here is that it's a huge optics issue. It was one thing to kill a lesbian mom who they could spin the story as she was a terrible mother and she deserved it. A lot of old boomers who are already judging her on the pretense of being gay are going to just slap those assumptions on her and move on with their lives. It's extremely unfortunate because that's, Renee Good, regardless of her being gay or not, did not deserve to be murdered by an ICE agent. But frankly, to a lot of hogs and Americans out there who, are really hardcore conservative and MAGA, they're already going to eat up that narrative that because she's a lesbian, she's automatically a bad mom. The problem with the Alex Pretty murder for the conservative and the ultra right wing is that they don't really have a narrative that they can spin about this guy because he posed absolutely no threat to ICE, and he was a pretty upstanding citizen is the thing. He was exactly what they would assume is an upstanding citizen, and he was a white man. That does play a factor into this. He's a white man. who, worked at the VA as a nurse and served in the Air Force. You don't get much more like it's pretty hard to spin that narrative or of who he was as some kind of scary terrorist. It's next to impossible to do that, and you can already tell that they tried to take the line of he's a terrorist, he was assaulting our officers, he was brandishing a gun, XYZ, blah 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 blah. All of the video evidence that came out after and during the time that they were trying to lie about it was proving the exact opposite, and not even conservatives could really take any spin to this that would help them in any way towards their ultimate goal of deporting like all non-white people. This is a situation where they're really backed into a corner right now. What are they going to do? Because, this is clearly not only bad optics, this is bad for their entire movement. Especially because of the Second Amendment stuff. Now, I personally don't really necessarily care as much about this because, like, right-wing gun conservative groups, I usually don't pay attention to what they're saying, but I do think it's pretty interesting that now the right wing is trying very hard to make sense of the fact that this person was legally carrying a firearm that he owned and that he had the right to own. And he took it to a protest. The thing is that a lot of conservatives, they love to, do the whole I'm a gun-toting American and it's my God-given right to own this gun. And it's like, sure, as a leftist, I'm not against people owning guns. And if to be quite frank, I really think that honestly, an armed working class is a working class that is one step closer to achieving a proletariat revolution. But I would say that it goes a little bit overboard. I don't know why people need AR-15s to be able to, hunt and, do regular things that you would do with a gun. I don't know. I don't own guns. I've never touched one, honestly, so I wouldn't know. But, I think that it's pretty interesting to watch what's going on right now. Because a lot of the conservatives are really ripping each other apart, trying to figure out how they're going to spin this narrative about this person who, by all accounts, should not be dead right now. But he is. And, that is something that his body lies directly at the feet of the entire conservative movement, who has been pushing for this for years. They have been pushing to do a crackdown on immigration for years. And this is what you get. You get untrained, Gestapo looking, dudes who want to go out and beat people up for fun for a paycheck, this is basically a roundabout way of saying that ICE just shouldn't exist. All power to the people and, community control of the police. This is a federal law enforcement agency that is going into different cities and kidnapping people from their homes. Yeah, it's going to be bad optics. I could have told you that one. But the thing is that conservatives, have fallen directly into the Fourth Reich mentality of, purity politics and this idea of, a lot of what you would see in a fascist regime and in a fascist, in a society run by fascist ideology. They want it both ways. The thing is that their grocery prices are not getting any lower. Their rent is not becoming any cheaper. Their water isn't coming out of their tap any faster, but, they're seeing people get kidnapped off the streets. And this was apparently supposed to solve all of our problems. I don't really think it is. And it has cost the lives of 8 people already. I think that it's pretty obvious what's going on right now. The conservative fascist movement is eating itself alive, trying to figure out what the next step is, because it has made a huge miscalculation. And it'll be really interesting to see how they move forward with this narrative and how they try to spin this, because I really don't know what they're going to do with this one. Fox News is really going to have to bend over backwards to get their audience to believe the horse manure that they're shoveling into their mouths. It's going to be a very interesting midterm election, is what I'm saying. And, so we had 10 more minutes here. The one other thing I really want to discuss today is the fact that Mexico has decided to cut off oil shipments to Cuba. Now, the problem with this, of course, is that on this channel, we are pro-Cuba. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. Yes, I'm an anti-revisionist. Absolutely. Absolutely, Che Guevara and Fidel Castro have revisionist tendencies and have had many problems. I'm not gonna deny that at all. I know there's gonna be some hojists in the chat that are already gonna be typing. I'm not out here being like, I fully endorse the Fidelistas and we must all become Fidel Castro. We are Fidel Castro. No, it's more of the fact that, I stand in solidarity with Cuba because this is a socialist country who has kept itself alive for decades at this point under heavy U.S. embargoes and just terrible treatment by the international world. And it's devastating to see that one of their biggest trade partners for oil is now basically cutting them off because empire said so. The United States empire has had it out for Cuba since the beginning, since the revolution. If you're unfamiliar, listen to season 2 of Blowback. I promise you will not want to miss that one. And I think that it's so incredibly disheartening to see headlines like that, seeing that Claudia Sheinbaum is essentially abandoning them. And it is because the Trump administration has most likely put a ton of pressure on the Mexican government to do so, because the Trump administration is trying to go for gold right now. They're trying to knock out Venezuela. They want to knock out Cuba. And ultimately, this is them trying to, what I think is some kind of very strange and malformed 5D chess move to go after China. Of course, the problem there is that China has better manufacturing, a larger population, a larger army, and more political influence in the region. In a lot of global South countries. China is an extremely powerful country. The United States, I'm not entirely sure if we could really win a war against China. And so, taking it back to Cuba here for a second, I think that with Cuba, it is incredibly, like I said, it's incredibly disheartening, but I would also, the thing is that Cuba has already been living in a situation. A lot of Cubans living on the island of Cuba have been living in a situation for a while now where access to energy and everything has been restricted heavily because of their lack of resources as it pertains to things like oil. And so, I'm interested to see how, I'm very interested to see how, the Cuban people handle this. I'm very interested to see how the Cuban government handles this, because this is going to be another huge challenge that they're going to have to deal with. The thing is that I'm not entirely sure if Mexico is going to actually come back and try to resolve things and go back to business as usual, because it seems as though once again the Trump regime is on an imperial warpath. They are very much trying to go after a lot of the remaining socialist states or semi-socialist states that have an ounce of leftist sympathy. Obviously they think, like I said, they think China is that. It's not. But, nonetheless, that doesn't stop them from still wanting to go after China in any way possible. And, by cutting off other socialist or semi-socialist states, or, exerting control over them, this is essentially a signal. Whether China takes that seriously, I don't know. But it's very much the moves of an empire who is desperately trying to cling on to its influence in the region. and which is trying to exert as much military power and might as possible in order to, once again, maintain its influence. The problem is that I don't think that the American military or the American government is really equipped to do another global conflict. I think there's a lot of problems that we're going to be seeing, and especially with their trying to cut off Cuba. I don't think that anyone's going to go to war over Cuba, unfortunately. Cuba has been very much, left in the dust. But I do think that this is certainly a signal, as I've said before, that the United States is trying to gear up for another global conflict. It has been very belligerent, trying to go after anyone and everyone and anyone who basically challenges its hegemony in any way. This is not going to end well. And this is only the beginning. And I fear for the safety of Cubans because the American empire is brutal. And, while the Cubans have been stuck under an embargo for decades at this point and have survived things like the Bay of Pigs and, the Cuban Missile Crisis and all of the terrible things that the American empire has done to that country, I am nervous because this could really impact their access to just basic needs and resources. It's essentially the Trump administration trying to, and let's be real, just the American empire in general. This does not start with the Trump administration, and it will not end with them. This is them trying to economically squeeze them into such a bind that they literally cannot exist anymore. Now, is that going to happen? I don't know because I don't know the future, and things could rapidly change at any moment. Mexico could start trading oil with them, could start sending oil again and start opening up trade routes. We don't know. There's a lot happening behind the scenes that we really aren't so sure about right now, but I will say this is absolutely not a good thing for Cuba, especially because Venezuela's been taken out of the mix now. Apart from that, I think that with the current problems that are happening between Mexico and Cuba, we really don't know how this is going to end. I don't have a ton of high hopes for Mexico deciding to change their mind because I don't think that they are sure what the Trump administration is trying to do right now, or is trying to attempt. And because the Trump administration is an erratic, political regime that is trying to grapple for power in any way possible, and it is messy, and it's extremely fraught, and it very well, I think, is going to end in some kind of conflict. What that conflict is, I don't know. I think that they're trying everything they can to stop the midterms. I would not be surprised if they tried to stop the midterms, because their optics look so bad right now. But again, there's so much time between now and November. It could be a completely different political landscape between now and then. And so I'm holding out hope that we can continue to organize and hopefully, create a movement and build up a movement that is a formidable force and that is able to sway things politically and keep this extremely corrupt imperial fascist regime at bay for long enough that we are able to make some kind of meaningful change and support our comrades abroad. But other than that, we're going to go ahead and move into the interview section now. This is with Comrades Marina and Ilektra. We had a wonderful discussion. I will say, it is a depressing topic. So if this really isn't something that you want to listen to tonight, I totally understand. Definitely just skip it for the night. Move on to the next one. We'll see you in the next one. But yeah, this is my interview with Marina and Ilektra. We had a wonderful conversation, and yeah, enjoy, folks. And I will see you next week. Bye. Okay, so we are back here again with some lovely guests for the topic of the trans genocide, which I know sounds kind of crazy, but these are real concepts that are actually happening, real things, and it's stuff that we need to talk about. And so, comrades, if you want to give yourself a quick introduction, each of you, and who you are, where you're from. And yeah.
Uh, Hi, my name is Marina. I am an organizer with the APL, located in Kansas City, the Kansas City metro area. And yeah, I've been organizing around queer and trans liberation as well as labor rights for about 2 or 3 years now.
Hey, my name is Ilektra. I am also an organizer with the American Party of Labor, located in Portland, Oregon.
Wonderful. Yeah. And today we're going to be, it's a big topic. We have a lot to talk about, but I know that Electra had an article that she's been writing for the topic. Electra, did you want to read that for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to.
Yeah, take it
Um,
away.
yeah, so this is it's meant to be a Red Phoenix article. It hasn't been published yet, but it has been submitted and approved. Experts warn U.S. in early stages of trans genocide. The truth may be worse. While conditions for transgender people in the United States have long been suboptimal, the second Trump administration is making clear moves to not only erase what modest progress has been made in the past few decades, but to wholly eliminate trans people as a population in their entirety. In the years leading up to the 2024 presidential election, the political right's anti trans rhetoric significantly increased in its intensity and frequency. Everyone from conservative news pundits to Republican state representatives to the current president himself began openly drawing clear lines between us, the normal, pure, cisgender people, quote unquote, and them, the wicked, untrustworthy, unsafe, quote unquote, trans people. Hearing blatantly exclusionary, dehumanizing speech, like Daily Wire commentator Michael Knowles' infamous proclamation that transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely at the March 2023 CPAC conference, became a near daily occurrence. This rhetoric served to normalize anti trans tendencies and viewpoints, manufacturing public consent for the current full scale curtailing of trans people's legal protections and right to bodily autonomy. The present situation has progressed in such an alarmingly treacherous direction that many top genocide scholars, such as those at the Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention and Human Security, are now warning we may be in the early stages of a genocide of trans people in the US. On January 20th, 2025, Donald Trump's first day in office during his second term as president, within hours of his inauguration, he signed Executive Order 14168, entitled Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government, which legally defines sex in the view of the US government as a strictly male female binary, completely and utterly immutable and without variation. A wholly unscientific assertion not based in reality whatsoever. See the existence of intersex people as a prime example of how preposterous this notion is. The order also required that the federal government halt all funding of gender affirming care and no longer allow people to self identify their gender on federal documents. A week after that order was passed, Trump passed Executive Order 14183, barring trans people from military service, declaring that being transgender, quote, conflicts with a soldier's commitment to an honorable, truthful lifestyle, unquote, essentially putting forth the assertion that the federal government itself considers all trans people to be inherently dishonorable and deceitful. A day later, the president signed yet another executive order which attempted to ban minors from receiving gender affirming care, despite the majority of medical organizations in the country testifying to its safety and efficacy. Important to note that at the time of this EO's signing, more than half of states had already enacted their own bans on youth gender affirming care, contributing to the mass migration of more than 400,000 trans Americans, 10% of the total trans population in the US, from their home states to states which have stronger protections in place. Something many people reading or listening to this article may not fully understand is that quote unquote gender affirming care, as it's commonly referred to, is not just a luxury good or frivolous amenity for trans people. It's quite literally the difference between life and death. It's a miraculous achievement of modern medicine in its most common form as hormone replacement therapy, HRT, activates dormant instructions in the DNA and guides the patient's body to begin rewriting itself to more fully align with their internal sense of self. It corrects a serious sense of wrongness that makes it simply impossible to live a normal, happy life. Speaking from experience as a trans woman, if I had not had the opportunity to access this type of care, I would not be here today to read this article to you. Gender affirming care is completely and utterly life saving, and it is of monumental importance that anyone who needs it is able to receive it. Unfortunately, the Trump administration hasn't stopped at just trying to take away life saving medical treatments from trans people. It has begun attempting to criminalize their very existence and remove what few legal protections existed for them in the first place. In December 2025, just a month ago, Attorney General Pam Bondi instructed the FBI to start offering cash bounties for information leading to the identification and arrest of so-called trans activists promoting so-called radical gender ideology. It's crucial to recognize here that, quote, radical gender ideology, unquote, in the eyes of the federal government, remember back to EO 14168, is simply anything that differs from the government's assertion that there are only two immutable and unchangeable biological sexes. If federal law enforcement begins to follow through on these new instructions, rounding up and imprisoning these quote unquote gender terrorists, people who just exist outside the bounds of what is considered normal and acceptable, there are now no longer protections in place to guard trans inmates in ICE custody from being sexually assaulted by their captors. What kind of situation are we in where the anti-trans right and the Democrats who enable them by conceding to their positions or by simply failing to take decisive action begin sharply increasing the amount of hateful transphobic vitriol they spew, directly setting the stage for the new Trump regime to begin systematically eradicating any legal protections that were in place, barring access to life-saving medical care, where top federal law enforcement officials begin explicitly encouraging the arrest and imprisonment of an entire group of people by offering monetary incentives based on entirely false pretenses and pseudoscientific nonsense, subjecting said group of people to unspeakable acts of inhuman violence with no means of escape. Make no mistake, we are not simply in the early stages of a trans genocide as the experts of the Lemkin Institute suggest. We are nearing the final stages, that of the wholesale extermination of trans people entirely. So what is to be done? How can this genocide be stopped before it reaches the point of no return? To the trans people listening to this, keep being you. Keep fighting for your right to exist as unapologetically as yourself. Do what you believe is necessary to stay safe while refusing to let the perpetrators of these crimes make you feel ashamed to be who you are. Take care of yourself and take care of each other. To the cis people listening, check in on your trans friends, the trans people in your lives and your communities, and offer whatever material and moral assistance you can to them. Highlight trans people's struggles, especially Black trans women's struggles, as they are so very often ignored and pushed to the sidelines. Unreservedly challenge and combat any and all transphobia when you encounter it. Check your transphobic coworkers and family members. Help them to see the errors of their ways. Stand in solidarity with your trans siblings and comrades in the face of these blatant, inhuman attempts to eliminate them from society. To everyone, organize. Get involved in local community struggles and organizations. Join a communist party, better yet, join the American Party of Labor, and start fighting for a better world where hatred and bigotry of all kinds will no longer have fertile ground to grow and spread, and will no longer be tolerated in any form. Organize, educate, inspire, and build the movement for the socialist revolution and the liberation of the working class and all oppressed peoples of the world.
That was such a good article. Thank you so much, Electra. What do you think, Marina?
I think it was a phenomenal article. I think it in particular touches on certain things that have come to the forefront in the organizing in the areas where I am, particularly the effect that it is going to have on transgender ICE detainees. We know that protections against violence and medical care in general are being revoked across the board at ICE detention facilities. That was reported as early as January 5th of this year. Um, it is no exaggeration to say that we are in the midst of a genocide against transgender people in this country. And I think Electra's article did a wonderful job of addressing just the seriousness and obviously, more importantly, the road we take towards finding ourselves out of this situation.
Yeah, I think that this article also is so like blunt, which I appreciate. It's not, try like I feel like when I read articles about this from like The Guardian or perhaps even well, I probably wouldn't read something like this from the New York Times because the New York Times are pussies. Um,
You
but
said it.
yeah. I don't think they would put things in the terms that you did with how dire they are. It would instead be considered, oh well, there's rollbacks to rights for trans people, but it's not a genocide. You'd be hearing that kind of more quote moderate position, which is really just like denial. Um, and I think that what you are talking about, comrade, is it's very alarming because it somewhat reminds me of in addition to not just like trans rights but also things like abortion rights. This is like a huge attack on like there's like a double-edged sword here as well with where both sides are cutting us where you have trans rights are being revoked, and not only revoked but completely uh like dissolved. And it's the same thing happening with women and really any group that is seen as less deserving in whatever capacity that might be, whether it be because women have to stay in the home or because trans people are not allowed to exist. um, and the binary part as well, I think is really important to recognize that they signed that executive order because that is very much laying the groundwork for them to do what they are doing. It's giving precedent. A lot of people are like, well, it's just words, it's just an executive order, like they don't, like what are they going to do? And it's like, no, this is the beginning, you know
No, they're absolutely laying the foundation. And exactly what you were just talking about how, it's starting with curtailing, trans people's access to the necessary medical care that they need. But it absolutely progresses to other things like denying people abortion care, and just all kinds of curtailing of people's bodily autonomy. And that's just, that's how this kind of thing works, right? Like there's no removing the bodily autonomy and civil rights of one group of people in a vacuum, like for fucking fascists. Like it's going to start with one group and then it's going to progress to other groups. And we've already seen that kind of thing happen. For example, like bathroom bans in certain states where
right.
trans people are barred from using public restrooms that align with their gender. And then I forget which state it is specifically, but I think there is one or two states that have essentially like encouraged residents to like film suspected trans people in the restroom and report them to authorities. And we've already seen like just non quote unquote conventionally attractive or non-conforming like cis women being mistakenly
Transvestigated.
identified, yeah, being transvestigated and being
Yep.
mistakenly identified as trans because people have certain preconceived notions about what a trans people looks like, what a trans person looks like.
Yeah.
um and that's the thing is it, people who are ignorant of the issues might think it's just an attack on this very small minority group of the population and it's not really going to affect anybody else, but it absolutely will affect a large portion of the population.
Yeah, it reminds me of, do you guys know who Candace Owens is?
Absolutely.
Yes, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, you know how she recently was pushing the whole transvestization of Emmanuel Macron's wife?
Yep.
I
Um,
actually did not see that. That's fucking insane.
yes, and I think it's kind of it is so incredibly insane because this person, like, now she's being sued by the Prime Minister of France, which is so funny. But yeah, they were transvestigating Bridget Macron, I think is her name, and it's insane because like it's become part of like the conspiracy theory network for right wingers, like transvestigating people because they've sown the lie that trans people equals like a pedophile, basically, or like that kind of disgusting idea of like what they view as like the swamp, and the like all the bad people that are doing bad things to children, and for the crazy ones, taking their adrenochrome. But
Absolutely.
but trans people have been on the chopping block for a while now, frankly, because these groups have been for years sowing lies about trans quote ideology, and it makes no sense. But to these people, everything's connected, everything is, like basically the actual people who are doing actual bad things, the capitalist class, couldn't possibly be the ones doing those things. No, no, no. We must find a different boogeyman, a different group to blame. And so trans people and somehow the Clintons are
Well,
trans people. The Clintons,
the Clintons, there's evidence
they
for
did do that
that
shit.
being the case,
The
but
Clintons did do that shit. The trans people did not. But somehow we have roped these two groups into the same group of quote bad people. And that's my little conspiracy theory tangent about
no, you're
the
right though.
the Candace Owens group. But Marina, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, in particular to this conversation about like transvestigation and the bathroom bills, one thing that was really interesting that was brought up in the Lemkin Institute article, one of the researchers, and I'm just going to read it just from the article. I can just find it again. Haley Brown, who's one of the researchers who was quoted in the article, also told the Lemkin Institute that the bathroom bills effectively give non-state actors tacit approval to commit violence. And I think that's a really, really important thing to think about. We tend to look at this idea of a state-sponsored genocide as just purely being violence from whether it's the police, ICE, whatever. But in reality, non-state people, just private citizens, are being invited to take part in this. And there is this stochastic terrorism that happens now because, technically speaking, no active violence is being called for. Um, but tacitly, um, people are very much encouraged to harass, intimidate, and even assault people who they assume for whatever reason is trans. So it's very interesting just how much these legislative acts, these bills, these executive orders encourage just people who are private citizens to engage and do these violent acts for on behalf of the state.
Right. Yeah. It feels as though like this is essentially like outsourcing the violence that the state would be doing to its followers who genuinely believe in this stuff. And I also think of like ICE and everything, for folks that aren't living under a rock. ICE, or for folks who are living under a rock, I guess, ICE just killed another person back on Saturday in Minnesota. And it was very much like an execution. And This violence that is happening, trans people are also very much experiencing. It's just not being broadcasted out there for people to see because this group, to liberals and conservatives alike, frankly, don't matter to them. They don't really care about trans people.
No, not at
Um,
all.
no, you wouldn't see Dana Fash on CNN being like, they're going after the dolls. They're going after the dolls. No, that's not happening. That's they're shills for the capitalist class, and right now the capitalist class, who interestingly, I'm actually little spoiler, I'll be doing another episode with this person, but I just did an episode with like last month, I think, with Erica from Venture Capital Status, where we talked about the network state and what a lot of these CEOs have in stock for us as it pertains to their what they want to do with the world, and how they see the future. And a lot of them are creating these zones where they basically like crypto zones and things where there's no laws and there's nothing that you
Freedom
can.
cities.
Freedom cities, yes. And I think this is very dangerous for many reasons, but on the issue of trans folks and their safety, I see a huge problem with these quote freedom cities. Um, because not only are there absolutely no rules, there's no rules-based order as pertains to like elected democracy, which not like that actually exists here in the United States, let's be real. But there's no there's no there's absolutely no way for us to be able to have any legal recourse or be able to stop them from just openly and blatantly targeting people and basically just killing people. Like, let's be real, they don't have any rules. There's no like it's so crazy to think about, but like, for trans folks, being in one of these zones, whether they want to or not, which most likely probably not, um, it's becoming so much, the dangers are heightening, the contradictions are heightening, you know. And these CEOs have very eugenics based ideologies, um, that see gender as a binary and also see women more specifically as an out group as well. And so
Absolutely.
and so trans folks are very much not accepted by these people, and trans women especially, time and time again, have been, trans men are of course also deeply, deeply oppressed. This is no secret. But there's always been a very specific targeting of trans women, where trans women are targeted as like the quote pedophiles and the weirdos and the I don't want men in women's bathrooms, type situation. And I think that that's really important to highlight, that when someone's trying to transition to being a woman, there is so much more propaganda around being against that. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I'll chime in here on that specifically. What you were saying is like so fucking accurate about there being this like obviously yes trans men and trans mess like face their own forms of oppression and we have shared oppression, but there is absolutely a hyper focus on trans women in one aspect, as you said, as like this like ominous cabal of pedophiles that are all conspiring to uh, both prey on your children and also convert them to the trans and bring them into
Yeah,
the cabal. It's this really weird thing. I feel like that aspect comes from just this weird um, general like blanket sexualization of like trans people's existence when we're kind of just like trying to be people who are alive and living
yeah,
our lives and happy in our own fucking skin, but that just like us existing for some fucking reason is inherently sexual to these people. I think part of it comes from just how sex obsessed American culture is in this very weird way, like in the sense that like
It's
where am I trying to go with it?
well, I understand what you're saying here. It's the way that men view cis women is and the versus the way they view trans women, like cis men specifically, and I'm talking conservative cis men.
yeah.
The sexualization of trans women is so different but also the same. It's a fetishization.
It's a fetishization, and it's also like, and obviously this isn't like like a correct assessment of reality, but from the perspective of the conservative cis man, it's like an intense form of homophobia, right?
Yes.
Because like they see us as men, but a lot of them are attracted to us, which is
Yeah.
something that they don't admit, and it deeply upsets them. Uh,
Yep.
I've experienced this firsthand a number of times. But what I was trying to say about like America being sex obsessed is like it's this weird dichotomy in our cultural zeitgeist where like evangelical Christianity like permeates like all fabrics of our society,
Right.
which brings with it like a overall sense of like prudishness and like being very reserved and hush hush about sex and sexuality and things like that. But what we see in societies where that is the case is there also is this weird like this dichotomy of having that while also having this like kind of like below the surface like constant obsession with sex in like a very unhealthy way, that essentially, at least in some cases, leads a lot of like transphobic people to like just view trans people as like an inherently sexual concept, or like view us as inherently sexual objects, when we're just fucking people that are trying to live like anybody else.
Yeah.
um and then this other part, about this hyper focus on trans women, um is the fact that women are treated like second class citizens,
Yep.
and these transphobes are also misogynists and just have a deep-seated intense hatred of women or anything feminine,
Yep.
um, which is one why they also hate gay people, but two is especially why they hate trans women, because it's almost like we're uh like gender traitors to them, where it's like
Right.
you were born a man, you had fucking everything, and you defected to the enemy, is essentially like how it's viewed in the eyes of a lot of people.
You defected, you
Yeah.
defector, so that you defected to the USSR, you communist. And
Yeah, basically. Well, it's like, yeah, it's double fucking sin in my case because I'm a trans woman and a communist. So it's just like
yeah, you're
there's
going to
just no,
hell.
yeah, there's no winning for me. Um
Yeah. Marina, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and I think just to kind of tie about it, I think it's really, really important. I don't want to get reductive, but at
Right.
the same time, I think it's very important to tie um, transphobia, especially this sort of resurgence of transphobia that we are seeing in a particularly new and openly violent way, back to the aspect of misogyny, because I think, while not to repeat myself, but at the risk of becoming reductive, I think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of transphobia does exist downstream of the violence and the control of women that is fundamental to capitalism.
Right.
It's not for nothing that the individuals who are the most vehemently anti-trans, the most vehemently opposed to reproductive freedom, in many cases are also advocating for the repeal of child labor protections. There is a necessity um, to um, to control that bodily autonomy, because by imposing these patriarchal gender roles, by opposing this very authoritarian control over the bodies of women, that does control access and what we would call like reproductive labor. Once again, not getting too reductive, but it's also very interesting that a lot of these people are very obsessed with like birth rates and things like that. So there is a very
Absolutely.
material need for capital to discipline and keep control of the bodily autonomy of the working class. So it's really important. We cannot separate transphobia and homophobia from the violence against women that happens under capitalism.
Yeah, it's all connected to like the root cause, which is capitalism. And I don't think it's getting reductive. I think it's getting to the point of the matter, which is that, these things are not their own, like these things are not isolated events that only happen within their own vacuums. No, these are all connected to a larger understanding of gender and sex that a lot of conservatives view as the correct way of thinking about these things, when in reality, something I think about a lot is Nick Fuentes, specifically the open secret that he is definitely gay and definitely likes trans girls. He, or more specifically, I should say, not trans women, cat boys, which is
Cat
uh,
boys, femboys,
cat
that
boys,
whole
femboys,
section. Yeah.
the twinks, the fem twinks that are in that. There is many categories within the gay community of what people, it's all a spectrum, where you fall and how you feel about your gender and everything. Nothing is set in stone. And I think that it's basically an open secret with among the conservative community that a lot of these men are obsessed, absolutely obsessed with femboys and with trans women. But it's also doubly true that they are extremely transphobic, extremely homophobic, and are actively campaigning against their own interests as gay men, basically, because Nick Fuentes is like he is gay. Like allegedly, I don't want to get sued by Nick Fuentes, but like he is like not a straight person. And it's interesting to watch them go through this process of trying to dehumanize and hate and basically do propaganda against trans people, gay people, women, XYZ, but they also are so obsessed. There's like this obsession with trans girls and everything. And like it's very much a fetishization, and it's a it's, I would say, like a deep-rooted hatred of their own like feelings on the matter.
No, absolutely.
But it's also spewing so much hatred and causing so much harm.
Well,
So
the thing
yeah,
is,
go.
is kind of on what you were saying. A lot of these like very like intense, like I mean, like hate drives, hate campaigns, and like drives to eliminate our civil rights. Um, I feel like is kind of like uh, it's an effort to put trans people back where they want us to be, which is on the margins of society. Um, the only way that we're able to survive and support ourselves financially is through prostitution or as a porn category, right? And I feel like
Right.
up until really the past a little more than a decade, when like it became more socially acceptable to be trans, and there was kind of like a relaxing of like trans repression, like in the early to late 2010s, and really I would say like up until like 2020, 2021. Um,
Right.
for a long time before that, really all we were to these people is a porn category. They were
Hmm.
behind closed doors, jerking off to us, and hiring trans prostitutes and using us as sex objects. And now suddenly we decided that, hey, we actually want to be recognized as equal human beings with bodily autonomy, and our own fucking, lives. That's not fucking acceptable, because we're just at the end of the day fucking subhuman objects essentially. And that obviously comes from these people's same attitude towards the category of women at large. Um, so it's just
Mhm.
it's fucked.
Yeah.
It's fucked basically.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it did yeah. No, I think that it's incredibly hard to wrap your mind around, because these people are so like reactionary, but are also so obviously like struggling with their own sexuality, which is like, it's interesting to like watch the contradictions heighten for them, because as trans people are more accepted in society and are given more autonomy and ability to exist without being harassed. They 20 years ago, it would be much more difficult to be trans at work, just in your regular life. But now things have really changed. And it's become a situation where a lot of these people are trying desperately to push trans people back into the closet, back into the margins, as you said, Electra, but that's just not happening. And so things are becoming more and more violent. And
Absolutely.
it's gotten to a point where a lot of these people, they they can't stand to think that they can't have control over a woman's body. That's what this is about. At least for their oppression and their obsession with trans women, because they know that they don't like cis women, is the thing. And
No, the
that's,
biggest haters of women of all time are straight men.
yes,
Straight men are actually all secretly gay as fuck, and
yes,
everything that they do surrounding like women and like conquest, chasing women, stuff like that, it's all to impress their
other
bros.
men.
Right?
Yeah,
When they go to the gym and they work out and they get all buff, it's to impress their bros, right? It's
it's for the
not.
boys.
It's like for the majority of women like don't even fucking like give a shit about if 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 my boy
Yeah,
is yoked or whatever, right? It's like it's
yeah.
all, yeah, it's just God.
It's incredibly, yeah. Yeah, I would love to hear your perspective on that, Marina.
Yeah. I think um where I'm particularly interested in this is not to take it back too far, but
Yeah.
in particularly in relation to Nick Fuentes, I think there have always been, as long as there have been these reactionary movements, these fascist movements, there have always been uh, uh, in particular, gay men who've been involved with these, whether it's Ernst Röhm or Yukio Mishima. A lot of individuals have existed within these movements, imagining that by championing these very violent, these very reactionary movements, they are not going to find themselves ever on the receiving end. And we know that that's not true. But I think there's also important to remember that a lot of these individuals were motivated very much by their class loyalty, and that trumped their identity as gay men, or as anything else. So I think there's always going to be the individuals, once again, whether it's the Ernst Röhms or the Blair Whites, um, who recognize where their loyalties are, and yet we know how it tends to happen. This violence never it never ends with the good ones. Um, so it is interesting just how much to type a lot of these individuals who are, like you said, struggling with their sexual orientation, their identity, find themselves in these movements, imagining they will never find themselves on the receiving end. It's a very almost predictable um, prototype in fascist movements.
Well, there was even in like Germany, like prior to and like during the rise of the Nazis, there were literally like Jewish organizations that sided with the Nazis, falsely believing that, hey, if we cooperate and like help them like round up the uncooperative Jews, they'll spare us, right? And instead it was this case of, hey, thanks for the help, now face the wall, you know?
Yep.
It's like there is no world in which collaborating with these fascist ghouls as someone who they view as undesirable is ever going to save you. You may delay your your inevitable end, but they will force you to an early grave eventually. So that's, you know, if you're even just like selfish and self-interested, you shouldn't be. But if you're just selfish and self-interested and interested in self-preservation, still your best interest is going to be to fight back, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
fascism necessitates a shrinking circle at some point.
Absolutely. Always.
The in group. Yeah, and it's the in group is getting smaller and smaller. I mean, I've been saying this for a minute now, but right now the conservative movement, as Trump declines in health and as things begin to change, because things are rapidly changing, the conservative movement right now is trying to figure out who counts as like a white person, who counts as the in group, the Candace Owen group and all of those people who split off from the Daily Wire, who were, who is a supporter of Israel. Candace Owens, of course, is not a supporter of Israel, but of course not for the right reasons. It's because she is a huge anti-Semite, and a lot of the conservative circle is trying to figure out, okay, do we consider Jewish people white or not? Who is white, who is in our group.
We're
And
bringing back that early 20th century racism
yep,
where Irish people and Italians are no longer white.
crazy, crazy, crazy. But yeah, no, that is very much what's happening right now, and it's happening. Um, it's happening in rapid succession to when Trump got elected again and again. His health is failing, and so we're seeing a rapid change in the conservative movement of, okay, the knives are sharpening. People are vying for the top dog spot in the conservative movement because, once again, Trump isn't going to be here forever. And so they're trying to figure out, okay, where do we go from here? Because obviously they don't want things to end. But their guy is no longer going to be the guy. And so as pertains to the persecution of trans people, we're going to see people who, as I think Electra talked about at the beginning of the episode, like the people over at, is it the Daily Wire, the guy who was like, we need to eradicate trans people from daily
Yeah,
life.
Knowles.
Yeah,
Michael
yeah,
Knowles.
yeah. We're going to see a lot more of people like that able to not just speak freely, but actually enact real policy. And there's no safeguard, there's no barriers against that. Not that there was when Trump was in office, or when not when Trump was in office, but when, with Trump as the head of the party. But it's getting to a point where things are rapidly becoming more violent, I would
Yeah,
say.
I think a lot of people, even those on the supposed left, have this idealistic false assertion that, oh, when Trump dies, which is seeming like it's going to be fairly soon given his declining health,
Right.
when Trump dies, uh it's over. The conservative movement can't survive without Trump at the top, and everything's just going to come crashing down, and the Republicans are going to get destroyed in the polls, and we're all going to go back to being able to ignore all the societal issues. Um, but like you were just saying, what I think is actually going to happen when Trump kicks the bucket, um, is there is going to be a bloodthirsty frenzy for the top spot as the guy to replace Trump, you know? Because like obviously like JD Vance is the vice president, so like legally speaking, he'll be set to succeed Trump. Um, but I don't think that he is the guy. You know, he doesn't have the disposition for that.
I think he's one of the many that are trying to go for it and are just not going to be successful.
No, not at all.
And I think that I don't, the thing is that with the MAGA cult of personality, no one can replace what Trump has. Because it's a cult of personality. That's how they work. Um, and I think that it's going to become a situation in which we're going to get an administration of people who are not only bloodthirsty, but also more competent, unfortunately, I fear.
Yeah.
I fear a change is coming, and not in the good kind, within their movement of people who, Trump teed up things for them to basically successfully execute a like mass movement of violence against minorities, and trans people are one of those groups, and I fear that it's going to become it's going to become a pretty bad situation. Did you want to add anything, Marina or Electra?
No, no, I do think you're right. I think we've seen a lot of the groundwork laid, and it is going to be uh, it's going to be an intense a stretch of years that we have. We have a tremendous amount of work ahead of us to undo these structures that have been put into place. And I think you're right. While Trump's personality is very important to the movement, it is going to be the individual or individuals who take over, who are really going to be able to successfully utilize the structure that has been put in place. And I think that is going to be where it is so important that we examine like the history of how queer and other exploited groups have successfully resisted these kinds of efforts, because we've seen this maybe in smaller scale before. But it's going to be very important both to look to historical movements as well as to be capable of learning from our new circumstances. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us. However, we do have a lot of great examples to kind of look back and learn how to build the structures that we need to engage and to resist these systems.
Yeah, and would you mind going into maybe some of those structures or ideas of resistance? Because I think that we should definitely discuss the resistance part of this. I don't want to just discuss the doom and gloom of, yeah, they're Nazis. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, I will always start by talking about my favorite, certainly in the context of America, which is STAR, Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries. I talked probably at length with you about this before. Um, but both them and the entire network of organizations that organized the Christopher Street Liberation Day, the first Pride event, all of those groups had a certain radical politic, maybe not as developed as would be ideal. However, they were incredibly good at organizing a population of people who largely were unhoused, largely were from various exploited minorities in addition to being queer. And they set up housing support. They set up methods of getting people medical care. They set up systems for treating substance addiction. And what is more, while this ultimately was not able to get developed to completion, were in the early days of forming alliances with other radical militant groups. Sylvia Rivera, one of the founders of STAR, was in regular contact with Huey P. Newton of the Black Panthers. The STAR's manifesto was heavily based on the literature being produced by the Black Panthers. And so there has always been a history of radical militant action and ultimately socialistly minded radical action within the queer community. And that has largely been scrubbed. Most people who know a little bit about the history of transgender people in the United States have heard of Sylvia Rivera, have heard of Marsha P. Johnson and others. But just how tied in and committed to radical and militant community organizing they were doesn't get doesn't get talked about nearly as much. A lot of that was heavily decimated by the AIDS epidemic and the incredibly poor response that this country had in handling that contributed very much to the loss of lives that the gay community experienced here. But the history is there, and it just needs to be reclaimed, and of course, expounded upon. As Marxist-Leninists, we recognize the importance of learning from the mistakes of earlier movements, of analyzing the unique material conditions we live in. But we have excellent examples and excellent historical data to start that work on.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think first of all, it's really awesome that they were in communication with the Black Panthers. I think that's amazing. And I think that as Marxist-Leninists, it is important to recognize the class features of, all of what is occurring right now, and how to best support queer folks, and especially trans folks, as we all navigate through this shitstorm. It's important to realize exactly where you stand societally. And I think that once we see that the labor movement, the movement for the movement for the emancipation of minorities, and the movement of the recognition of trans folks and the support of trans folks and everything, it's all intrinsically connected. And we can't sacrifice or substitute one for comfort. It's about having solidarity with all of these different groups, and understanding that we are all in this struggle together.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I would strongly recommend for anyone kind of wanting to kind of take a look into that historical context. Um, the the charter of STAR, which once again was written by Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, um, actively called for the provision of free clothing, education, food, healthcare, housing, and transportation. It included the calling for a revolutionary people's government and an end to capitalist exploitation for queer and straight people alike. So the struggle against capitalism, the struggle against the exploitation of working people has always been central to the gay liberation movement. We unfortunately have just lost that history um, due to the co-option of the Pride movement by things like LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce. I know this is another thing that I talked about a lot when I was on last, but we have ceded the ground when it comes to our Pride events to a very sanitized and acceptable to the ruling class variation of queer joy and queer liberation. And it's very, very important that we reclaim that history of radical resistance and solidarity with other exploited groups, understanding, like you said, that this exploitation of trans people does not exist in a vacuum. It is part of the broader exploitation that happens under capitalism, and we have a responsibility to resist it.
No, you're absolutely right. And I just think like, yeah, everything y'all are saying is just so fucking is just so real, and it really gets to the core of the issue. And I don't think that it is reductionist at all to say that at the end of the day the root problem is capitalism as a system entirely, because really anything that inhibits its subjects' ability to churn out more laborers to exploit, right? Which from the standpoint of the monogamous nuclear family of two cis straight people, that's the preferred family unit and gender structure of choice for capitalism to continually churn out more laborers to exploit, right? Anything that stands against that is a existential and systemic threat to the system as a whole, to the capitalist class's ability to extract surplus value. And so, yeah, I don't think it's reductionist to say that the root problem is capitalism. I think it's actually the wrong course is to take the road of the revisionist crypto Nazbol American Communist quote in quotes party, and essentially say, well, the struggles of queer people, of other oppressed minorities don't actually matter, and the only thing that matters is the class struggle. It's actually acknowledging that no, it all matters. The root problem is the class struggle, but it's all interconnected, and all forms of oppression have to be fought in tandem, right?
Yeah, I need to.
Anything that distracts the working classes, crosshairs from being squarely on the capitalist class should be combated, not ignored, not pushed to the sides.
One struggle that happens on multiple fronts.
Exactly. And everyone has their place in that struggle. And the important thing is that we recognize that, and we're all in it together, and do what we can to push forward our front lines.
Yeah, as it pertains to the ACP, you mean the MAGA communists?
Communists in quotations, of course.
I got a DM one time from someone saying that I should join the ACP, and I was like, I'm not doing that. But okay, like it was very weird. And yeah, like the idea that, oh, none of that actually matters, it's only the class struggle, is such a reductive and frankly just such a bad reading of Marxism. Like it's such a that's so ridiculously like stupid. That like they're like, no, that's not actually, it's basically saying that's not real. The only real struggle is the class struggle, as if trans people aren't being persecuted right now. That's such a stupid line. Yeah. We don't support the ACP here. The MAGA commies, if you can believe it, that's a real thing. But yeah, I think that the struggle for trans liberation, has often, it's always intertwined with the class struggle. And it's because, as we've just discussed, these are, transphobia, homophobia, misogyny, all of these and more, all of these are tools to divide the working class further, by creating division, saying, oh, well, men are better than women, or cis is better than trans, and straight is better than gay, and XYZ, when in reality, we're all being exploited by the same, by the capitalist class. This is not, it's one of those situations where, just because you're getting a few crumbs more than the person next to you who you view as lesser than because they're trans or a woman or gay, it doesn't mean that you're living the high life. That doesn't, when you put it in perspective, you're both still getting crumbs, you know?
Yes, but it is a very effective method at dividing attention. So unfortunately, it works. But
Yes.
um,
Yeah. But yeah, I think that, you know, I, as it pertains to now and the general strike that's been happening in Minnesota, I don't know, were there protests today? Were there demonstrations today at all in Minnesota?
I think there is ongoing protests and I mean what's essentially street brawls happening that have kind of been nonstop from what I've seen.
Okay.
Just constant streams of footage pouring out of Minneapolis is just looking like a war zone there right now.
Yeah. For those who don't know, I work nights, so I sleep during the day. So when things are happening, I do not know. um, so I'm like, I'll like wake up at like 10 p.m. and be like, oh, what's happening? I gotta check the news. But yes, for those who once again been living under a rock, there are massive strikes going on in Minnesota right now due to the shooting of Renee Good and now Alex Pretty. But I should also state that there have been I believe, seven killings by ICE, this last just this year, and it's not even the end of January. If you're interested in knowing those names, I initially found them actually on Pedro Pascal's Instagram account. So
Yeah, I saw that today as well.
reposted it on my story, but you should definitely educate yourself about those folks who were taken from us way too soon, by ICE. But understand that these violent outbreaks, from government forces, basically the Gestapo, um, these violent outbursts are, well, a lot of folks think that they're just trying to go after quote illegal aliens, which is still equally wrong. Understand that that violence will only be expanded further. And it will only be expanded, it will be expanded further to encompass more and more groups of people who are seen as dissenters, who are seen as undesirables, who are seen as unworthy,
Antifa.
Antifa somehow. Um,
Not a good
yes.
look when your mortal enemy is the anti-fascists.
Yep, that's the thing is we did a whole episode on that. Um, Still pondering, I think, how do you do that? Oh yeah, you're the fascist. That's right.
So
But yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Andrew.
to pull up that list of people that have been killed by ICE so far this year, I think because I think it is important to acknowledge the other people
Yes.
that don't get as much coverage. Alex Pretty and Renee Good, obviously, fucking tragic. But ICE has also killed a black man named Keith Porter, a Cambodian named Pardi La, 5 Latinos named Eber Sanchez Dominguez, Victor Manuel Diaz, Luis Beltran Yanes Cruz, Luis Gustavo Núñez Cáceres, and Gerardo Lunas Campos. And that's just, again, this year. And it's not even the end of January.
Yes.
And you have to think, like, if they're willing to, I mean, and all of us at this point have seen the video of them executing Alex Pretty in the street. It was a blatant execution. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If they're willing to do something like that to a cis white man in broad daylight, what kind of fucking horrors are they committing behind closed doors in these fucking concentration camps that they've constructed? What kind of unspeakable, monstrous shit is fucking happening right now?
Yeah.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, go ahead.
To a certain extent, we know exactly what is going on. Because once again, kind of coming back to what we talked about a little bit, ICE would not be deleting rape protection for trans inmates in detention centers if that was not something that was actively happening.
Absolutely.
We know that they're doing that. We know that they are also in, once again, at least the 5 detention centers that we know about, they have actively withdrawn medical care. Now, whether that is limited to gender affirming care, we don't know. But we have at least a small picture of what is happening to trans people within these ICE detention centers. Once again, what we know is almost certainly significantly less than what is happening. But at the very least, we know that. It is genuinely no exaggeration to say that we are in the active stages of crimes against humanity within these centers, and then of course
Absolutely.
just an ongoing genocide.
And that's why it's so important to have these conversations and call this shit out for what it is before it gets to that full scale assembly line style extermination. Because the only way that we're going to prevent it is by being fucking honest and calling it for what it is and getting organized to fucking stop it. If we fucking tiptoe around the issue and go, oh well, they aren't all throwing people in fucking furnaces and lining people up against the wall and shooting them yet, so we can't really call this a genocide.
Can't be
Doesn't
that
start with
bad.
that.
Yeah, it can't be that bad, right? It's just like they all fucking start with exactly the kind of fucking shit we're seeing right now. Exactly. It's this from the same fucking playbook that they've been using for fucking forever now.
Yeah.
And the only way we're going to be able to stop it is to fucking recognize it and fucking vehemently push back against it. And like, yeah, it's just like you were saying, Marina, like circling back to uh like they wouldn't be removing protections for against sexual assault for trans inmates if that wasn't fucking happening. We know that's been happening to, at the very least, cis migrant women. There's been
yeah.
explicitly documented cases of migrant women who were detained and luckily got released, detailing brutal fucking sexual violence while being detained. There's been cis men who have reported having their fucking testicles crushed as a form of punishment and fucking ICE agents laughing about it.
That's insane.
If you want to get really into the fucking weeds of some absolutely fucking heinous shit happening in this country, look up what V coding is on Google or on Wikipedia. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's essentially a common practice in the US prison system where trans women inmates who are by and large put in men's prisons are essentially like deliberately put into cells with known sexual criminals and with people who are knowingly sexually violent so that they get raped repeatedly. Like it's a deliberate choice.
Yeah.
And are often used as a currency, bought and sold,
Yes. Yeah.
forced to engage in quote unquote. I hate to use this word, but it is the word they use. Prison marriages
Yeah.
and things like that. It is an extremely common concept.
Yeah. It reminds me of, do you guys know Nikita Dragon at all?
I don't.
I'm not familiar with the name either.
She is an influencer. She's a trans woman, and she's had some controversy in the past, but at one point she ended up going to jail. I forget for what exactly, but I remember watching. She did had like a court proceeding on Zoom, and she requested that she be moved to a female prison because this is a trans woman who's been living as a trans woman for years. She is no she is passing. She is very passing.
Not that that would
Um,
matter.
Not that it would
Right.
matter, not that it does matter, but this is a person who is very obviously a trans person who has been trans for many years of their life. She has gotten many surgeries done. She is a lot of gender affirming care, which is great, but they deliberately put her in a men's prison. I do not know what happened, if anything did happen to her, but that is one example, more celebrity based, of course, but that is one example of like, yes, this is happening. This isn't just a one or two person situation. No, this is happening to
It's a
so many
systemic
people.
practice.
Yes, yes.
I don't remember where I got this, where I heard this data, but a while back I saw a statistic that was essentially like there are roughly 5 to 6 thousand incarcerated trans people in the US. And out of that amount, only about 15 of them are in a facility that aligns with their actual gender. So yeah,
That's
it's
that's no good. That is, yeah. And like this is systemic violence. This is and it's deliberate, and it is happening because we live in a deeply transphobic society, especially right now with the present political situation. And as we come to the close of the episode, I think it's so important to highlight and to recognize that there is resistance happening right now. This is not all we're not being completely trampled with no resistance happening whatsoever. Things are happening. It's just a matter of getting involved. And if you were wondering when is the time, now is the time. Not tomorrow, not the time is yesterday. The time was yesterday to start getting things going. And so if you're a person listening to this and thinking, what can I do, there is so much on the individual level that you can do. And that means joining organizations that are there to support trans folks, whether it be through their transition or otherwise. But there's also a broader coalitions to join as well. Is there anything you guys wanted to comment on, organizing wise?
yeah,
Um,
obviously. Oh no, you go first.
oh no, I'm sorry, I did not mean to talk over you. I think just generally, obviously a great deal of what we talked about is been bleak information, and it's been scary information, and it is very easy when confronted with that for that to have a paralytic effect. But it's very
Yeah.
important to understand things are serious, things are scary, things are not hopeless.
Yes.
There is tremendous opportunities that we still have. It's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult, and it's going to require us to get out of our comfort zone,
Yes.
to get out of that individualistic, especially even for trans people, we tend to have a very hyper inward focus, our own
Hmm.
transition, our own needs and comfort and safety. And it's going to require us to maybe put that to the side, um, but we can find ourselves out of this situation. We can fight. We can build a better world. And we just have to get out into the streets, to get involved, and to organize.
No, you're absolutely right. I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, there are so many things that we can do on an individual level, but it's also important to remember that we cannot succeed in destroying the suppression and building a better world on an individual level. It is an absolute necessity that we get organized. Um, as members of the working class, whether you're gay, straight, trans, black, white, Asian, Latino, whatever group you belong to, if you're a member of the working class, it is of the utmost importance that you get organized, join an organization, form one if there's one in your area that you don't like. Join the American Party of Labor. We have to plug the organizations that we're a
Shameless
part of
plug.
here.
Shameless
Plug.
plug.
Absolutely zero shame behind that.
No, no shame at all.
The APL is growing fast. We're doing lots of great work all over the country. But the main thing that is inhibiting that work is we just need more help. We need more people out there with us. If you don't think that you're ready to join an org, just find your local orgs and just show up and offer your support and your help and just ask, hey, I'm ready to fucking do this shit. What can I do to help? What can I do
Go
to
to
push?
the thing.
Yeah, go to the thing, essentially, is what it comes down to. Go to the thing. And yeah, as Marina was saying, get out of your comfort zone. A lot of us trans people, we have a very inward focus. A lot of us also, I feel like, are very insular, like within our own tight-knit communities. There's something to be said for having a community of people like you. As a trans person, I would absolutely kill and die for all of my trans sisters and siblings in my community. But you have to branch out too, right? You have to branch out to the working class broadly, and make inroads with other communities in the working class and build inter-community solidarity, and support, and just like build consciousness and recognition amongst everyone that we are in this together, regardless of identity. We are in this together, and the only way out is through, and the only way through is through discipline and hard work and organization and sacrifice, yes, and discomfort, yes, but that is what it takes. That is really what it takes. Something that I kind of just like wrote when I was kind of brainstorming this shit a day or two ago is that what a lot are not ready for but need to be ready for is the fact that building a revolutionary movement does take unwavering discipline and dedication and constant hard work applied over a long period of time. We all have to be willing to put in work that we may very well not ourselves live to see the fruits of. But we still have to learn how to be selfless and put others first, put the working class first, put the people that will live and die after we live and die first. And we have to put our planet's interests first. We have to put in the work now. There is no future if we don't put in the work now. And it is not glamorous. No, it's not, but it's so crucial. And I personally I refuse to fall into doomerism. I am a revolutionary optimist pilled
Yes.
bitch.
Yes.
And we have come too far as a species on this planet to just let it all fucking go away and get flushed down the fucking toilet and all this fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we have so much potential and it can be realized. It can be, but we have to fight for it.
Yeah, good things
That's what
don't
I'll
come
say.
easy. This exactly. I think that's a great way to end it. And I think that resisting and getting involved in organizations, like the American Party of Labor or like Red Youth Rising, If you are a youth, I am a youth. I'm 22. I'm not really like, I'm not like a young youth, but you know, I'm a youth. And if you are a youth, then join Red Youth Rising. And yes, get involved, get militant, and start, you know, if you're in Minnesota, join the strike. Join the strike. If you are elsewhere, you know, continue to organize, and when the opportunity arises, you know, strike, get out there, start resisting, and build connections and organization. You know, the time is now. So, yes, thank you both so much for coming on the show. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.